The Cole Heights boardroom smelled like old money and fresh panic. Daniel Cole sat with his hands folded too tightly on the polished table, a man rehearsing composure he didn't feel. Beside him, Victoria kept her spine straight, chin lifted, the last defense of a woman who had lost everything except her pride. Unpaid salaries. Rejected loans. A company circling the drain while she still wore her mother's pearls like armor. The door opened. Amara Okafor walked in wearing a simple white suit, and the room seemed to shrink around her. Daniel rose first, slowly, like a man greeting a verdict. Victoria's face lost its color in one long drain, the pearls suddenly looking like something borrowed from a life that no longer belonged to her. Amara set the acquisition documents on the table without a word. Her eyes moved once around the room, the same marble floor, the same gold-trimmed windows, where 5 years ago, her life had come apart in front of everyone. Security had dragged her through this same lobby in the rain. 14,000 naira in her pocket. A theft accusation stitched to her name like a scar. Now her signature was the only thing standing between this company and ruin. 5 years ago, Amara Okafor left Cole Heights Hotel in the rain with one bag, 14,000 naira, and a criminal accusation hanging over her name. On the morning she returned, every person who laughed at her waited for her signature to save their jobs. How did a disgraced receptionist become the most powerful woman in the room? Amara learned early that the world doesn't wait for you to grieve. Her father died when she was 7. A memory more shape than detail, a voice she strained to hold on to. Her mother worked 3 jobs to keep her in school, then spent the last 2 years of her life fighting an illness that emptied the house of everything but bills. By 22, Amara had buried both parents and learned that surviving wasn't the same as living. She took the receptionist job at Cole Heights Hotel because it paid on time, and because nobody there yet knew enough about her to pity her. She was good at it. Better than good. She remembered returning guests by name, by preference, by the small things that made people feel seen. The businessman who liked his coffee black and his silence uninterrupted. The elderly widow who came every June and needed no one to know why. When a furious client's reservation vanished from the system, Amara didn't panic or apologize her way through it. She found him a better room, comped his first night from her own initiative, and had him laughing before he reached the elevator. She built a simple follow-up system nobody asked for. A notebook of names, dates, quiet details, and repeat bookings quietly climbed. Managers took the credit. Amara didn't argue. She was watching something bigger, patterns, systems, the architecture of how a hotel actually ran. Daniel Cole noticed her the day she disarmed a guest complaint that should have ended in a lawsuit. He came back the next day with a question that didn't need asking. Then again the day after. Amara knew who he was, the heir apparent, the name on the building. She kept the distance professional, deliberate, unimpressed by his last name. But Daniel kept finding reasons to stand at her desk. "There's a coffee place 2 streets from here," he said finally, after her shift ended. "Terrible service. I think you'd fix it in 5 minutes." Amara almost said no. She said yes instead, and didn't yet know it was the first step toward losing everything. The coffee turned into an hour. The hour turned into a habit. Daniel didn't talk to her like a Cole talking to staff. He asked what she read, what she wanted before her parents died, what she wanted now that surviving had become the only ambition she'd let herself keep. Amara found herself answering honestly, which frightened her more than the questions did. She still kept the line professional at work. Arrived early, left without lingering, never once let a guest or a manager catch a flicker of what was building between her and the owner's son. She'd watched enough women in this hotel lose their jobs over rumors alone. She wasn't going to be one of them. But Victoria noticed anyway. Victoria had grown up assuming Daniel's future came with her name attached to it. An understanding between families older than either of them. She started appearing at the hotel more often, watching the reception desk the way one watches a threat, not a person. She was polite to Amara's face. Cold in every way that mattered. Amara told herself it didn't matter. Daniel wasn't hers to defend, and Victoria wasn't hers to fight. Then, on a Thursday that started like any other, a guest's bracelet went missing from room 412. The same room Amara had personally checked that morning, the same wing where Victoria had been seen lingering an hour before. The front desk phone rang. Security was already on their way up. And Amara, still holding her follow-up notebook, still believing her work spoke for itself, had no idea she was about to lose everything she'd spent 5 years building. Daniel told her the truth on a night he hadn't planned to. "I've never chosen anything in my life," he said, staring at the hotel skyline instead of her. "Not my school, not my job, Not the woman my father expects me to marry. I just walk into the life that's already been decided. Amara didn't offer comfort. She offered a question. Then what do you want? No one had asked him that before. She could tell by how long it took him to answer. That was the night she stopped seeing the Cole name and started seeing the man underneath it. Tired, thoughtful, hungry for a version of himself nobody in his family had bothered to imagine. They began meeting quietly after that, careful, folded into the gaps of his schedule. Daniel promised the secrecy was temporary. Once my father gives me real control, he told her, I won't have to hide anything. Not you, not us. Amara believed him, because believing him was easier than doubting the only person who made her feel like more than a survivor. For 3 years, she built the case for the man she loved without anyone knowing her hand was in it. She prepared his reports at midnight after her own shift ended. She rewrote proposals the board had already dismissed once, sharpening them until they were undeniable. She read every hospitality trend she could find and fed him ideas like she was arming him for a war he didn't know he was fighting. When the Lecky branch was bleeding money, it was Amara's strategy that turned it around, a loyalty system built from the same notebook nobody at the front desk had ever noticed. Daniel presented it as his own. His father praised him. The board applauded him. Amara sat in the back of that meeting, unnamed, and told herself pride didn't need credit to be real. But small things kept surfacing, like stones under still water. Daniel let go of her hand the moment a senior director rounded the corner. A manager once spoke to her sharply in the lobby, loud enough for others to hear, and Daniel said nothing, just looked away, like silence was neutral instead of a choice. Whenever she raised it, gently, without accusation, he had the same answer ready. After we're married, everything changes. I promise. She held on to that promise like scripture. On the hotel rooftop, under the same sky she used to watch alone after closing shifts, Daniel got down on one knee. No family. No cameras. Just him, finally choosing something in front of her. Amara said yes, believing 3 years of invisible sacrifice had finally arrived somewhere solid. 2 days later, Daniel told her his family wanted to celebrate. An engagement dinner. Everyone would be there. Amara didn't yet know that everyone included a woman who had been waiting 5 years for exactly this chance. Amara spent her savings on a modest navy dress, simple enough to be tasteful, careful enough not to look like she was trying to buy her way into a family that had never wanted her there. She practiced her posture in the mirror. She told herself the hardest part was already behind her. Daniel had chosen her. Surely the rest was just formality. She was wrong before she even sat down. Victoria watched her enter the private dining room, the way a predator watches something wander into open ground. Patient, amused, already certain of the outcome. The rest of the family followed her lead without needing instruction. Questions came disguised as curiosity. Where did you go to school, dear? Remind us, what did your parents do? Which of the Lagos families are you connected to? Each answer Amara gave was met with a small, practiced silence, the kind designed to make an honest answer sound like a confession. Daniel shifted the conversation twice. He never once said her name with pride. He never once said enough. Then Victoria leaned forward, voice honeyed. It's remarkable, really, how much we know about people once we simply ask around. She recited details of Amara's upbringing that Amara had shared with no one at that table. Her mother's illness, the debts left behind, the receptionist job she'd taken out of necessity, not passion. Some women, Victoria said, look for love. Others look for an exit. I wonder which kind we're seated with tonight. Amara kept her hands still in her lap. I loved your son before I knew what his name could give me, she said quietly. I still would, if it gave me nothing at all. Victoria smiled, like she'd been waiting for that exact sentence. You are good enough to serve our guests, she said, loud enough for the whole table. But you will never be good enough to carry our family name. Amara looked at Daniel. He looked at his plate. The silence that followed was longer than anything Victoria had said. After dinner, Victoria found her alone near the coat room, a folded envelope already in hand. Take this, she said. Disappear quietly, and no one has to know you were ever foolish enough to believe this could work. Amara didn't take it. My love was never about what your family has, she said. You can't buy back something that was never for sale. Victoria's smile thinned into something colder. By tomorrow, she said, you will wish you had taken the money. Amara walked out into the night without looking back, still believing love had survived its worst test. She didn't see Victoria lift her phone the moment the door closed. Didn't hear her ask, in a voice gone flat and businesslike, to to be connected to hotel security. The call came before breakfast service even started. A guest in the Diamond Suite reported a missing necklace. Emeralds, family heirloom, insured for more than most staff would earn in a decade. Security moved fast, the way they always did when the guest had money and the hotel had reputation to protect. Lockers were opened. Rooms were searched. Amara stood in the staff corridor with her arms folded, unbothered, because innocence felt like solid ground under her feet. Then they opened her bag. The necklace sat there, coiled among her things like it had always belonged. The corridor went silent, then didn't. Colleagues gathered in the doorway. Some just watching, a few already recording. Phones angled like this was content before it was a person's life falling apart. She heard a whisper behind her, thief. Someone who'd praised her system for repeat bookings 6 months ago now looked at her like she'd never been anything else. Amara didn't move. She didn't cry. She simply said, "I want to speak with Daniel." He came with Victoria beside him, flanked by senior managers who'd already decided the outcome before anyone spoke. Amara looked past all of them, straight at the only person she believed could still fix this. "Victoria threatened me last night," she said, steady despite the room. "She told me I'd wish I'd taken her money by morning. This is what she meant." Victoria's hand went to her chest, wounded, theatrical. "Now she accuses family," she said. "This is what desperation looks like." Daniel raised a hand, quiet, asking the room to clear. When it was just the two of them, Amara stopped holding back. "Remember every report I wrote for you at midnight," she said. "Every proposal I rebuilt from nothing. The Lecky branch, that was mine, Daniel, and I never once asked for credit because I thought loving you meant something. Please, remember me." Something in his face cracked. She saw it, the war behind his eyes, love pulling one way and fear pulling harder the other. But when he spoke, it wasn't the answer she needed. "I need time," he said, "to understand what happened." "If you need time to decide whether I'm a thief," Amara said, "then you never knew me at all." He didn't stop them. Her employment ended before noon. Her staff room was cleared out an hour later. The engagement dissolved without either of them saying the word out loud. No fight, no formal ending, just silence swallowing 3 years whole. Security walked her through the lobby. She'd once run better than anyone. Rain hit the glass doors in sheets. Employees lined the entrance to watch, the way people watch a car crash they can't look away from. Someone laughed. Someone else called out that she should have taken Victoria's money when she had the chance. Amara walked into the rain carrying one bag, the same as 5 years, no hours, before this had all begun to unravel. She kept listening for footsteps behind her, for Daniel's voice cutting through the water and noise. He never came. By the time she reached the bus station, soaked through and hollow, she realized she had absolutely nowhere to go. She counted what was left in her pocket. Barely enough for a week, let alone a life. Her thumb hovered over Daniel's contact in her phone. She deleted it instead, before she could talk herself out of it. "Amara Okafor?" She looked up. A man settled onto the bench beside her, unbothered by the rain still misting the shelter. She recognized him after a second. Adrian Blake, a businessman who'd run investor meetings at Cole Heights months back when a booking system error had nearly buried his entire presentation before it started. She remembered fixing it in minutes flat, calm under pressure, while 3 assistants panicked around her. "I heard what happened at the hotel today," Adrian said. "The whole staff is talking about it." "Then you've heard I'm a thief." "I've heard a story," he said. "I don't believe everything I hear." He studied her for a moment, direct, no performance in it. "Did you steal the necklace?" "No." That was all he needed. He didn't ask for evidence or an explanation. He simply nodded, like her words settled something in him that gossip couldn't touch. "My travel company is in trouble," he said. "Small office. Debt was still climbing out of. I can't pay you what you're worth, not yet. But I remember how you handled my crisis in 5 minutes when your own manager couldn't handle it in 30. I could use someone like that." Amara almost laughed at the size of the offer against the size of the fall she'd just taken. A junior role. A struggling company. A salary that wouldn't cover much more than rent. But he was offering her something Daniel never had. Not once in 3 years. Belief without conditions, without proof, without needing time to decide if she deserved it. "I'll take it," she said. The next morning, she stood in front of a small, tired-looking office above a row of shuttered shops, rain still clinging to the windows. It wasn't Cole Heights. It wasn't marble floors or gold trim. But it was hers to build from the ground up, and this time, no one would ever again get to erase her name from the work she did. The office smelled like dust and old paper the first morning, and Amara cleaned it herself before anyone else arrived. No assistant, no title, just a broom and a decision to start again. She answered every call herself. She absorbed every angry client without flinching. The same steadiness that once calmed a businessman's ruined reservation, now spent on customers who had no idea what she'd survived to be sitting across from them. At night, she slept in a small room behind a family friend's shop, for walls and a mattress, and stayed up past midnight studying hotel management textbooks and digital marketing courses she couldn't afford but found anyway. Adrian noticed the discipline before he noticed the results. Amara studied why the company kept losing customers to bigger agencies and found the answer within weeks. Nobody was serving families who wanted comfort without luxury pricing. She built affordable holiday packages from scratch, partnered with smaller hotels the major agencies ignored, and introduced online booking the company had never bothered to modernize. She trained every staff member the same way. Treat each customer like they matter, because they do. Her first campaign failed. Money bled out faster than it came in, and for one night, Amara let herself feel the full weight of the loss. Then she studied every mistake line by line, and rebuilt the strategy from the ground up. The second campaign didn't just work, it changed the company's trajectory. Bookings climbed. Customers began recommending Amani's packages to friends who'd never have looked twice before. Adrian gave her more authority, and predictably, that authority made enemies. One senior manager, threatened by how fast she'd risen, sabotaged her figures before a major partnership presentation. Amara caught the discrepancy in real time, corrected it in front of the room, and saved the deal without raising her voice once. Adrian removed the manager within the week and handed Amara the department instead. She didn't celebrate, not really. Somewhere in the last 2 years, her goal had quietly shifted. She wasn't building this to prove Victoria wrong anymore. She was building something no one could walk into a room and take from her again. Adrian saw it too. One evening, without ceremony, he slid a folder across his desk. "Shares," he said. "You've earned ownership, not just a salary." Amara looked at the offer for a long moment, and for the first time since the rain outside Cole Heights, she let herself believe survival could turn into something permanent. 2 years later, Amara sat at the head of the boardroom table as managing director, the company no longer just booking holidays but managing hotels of its own. Small ones at first, run on a model she'd built from every lesson Cole Heights never taught her. Respect, efficiency, comfort that didn't require wealth to access. Adrian, preparing to step back from the business entirely, offered her his remaining shares gradually rather than all at once. Amara took the risk without hesitating. She sold what little she still owned of value, reinvested every profit instead of spending it, and rebuilt the company's foundation piece by piece until it was unmistakably hers. She renamed it Amani Hospitality Group. Amani Peace, the thing she'd found only after losing absolutely everything. At the opening of her first flagship hotel, a young woman applied for a front desk position, nervous and underdressed for the interview. Unaware the woman reviewing her application had once stood exactly where she was standing. Amara read her resume, asked about her work at Cole Heights, and hired her on merit alone. No memory of the woman's face from years earlier holding any weight in the decision. Word spread fast about the way Amani treated both guests and staff. Investors who'd once ignored a struggling travel company now sought meetings. Within 5 years, Amani Hospitality Group had become one of the fastest-growing hospitality brands in the country, and Amara Okafor, once escorted through a lobby in the rain, now held wealth, influence, and a name people said with respect instead of pity. She kept one thing from those years locked in her desk drawer. Her old Cole Heights name tag, small and scratched, a reminder of exactly how far the distance had been. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, her assistant placed a confidential report on her desk. Cole Heights Hotel, parent company Amani Hospitality Group was quietly acquiring stakes in, was collapsing under unpaid debts, failed loans, and a board with nowhere left to turn. Amara opened the file slowly and read the name at the top of the distress list. Cole. Daniel's father died on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday, Daniel was chief executive of a company he had never actually learned to run. The strategy had always been Amara's, the reports, the proposals, the instincts that made him look capable in front of the board. Without her, he was a man wearing his father's title with none of the muscle memory underneath it. Victoria filled the gap quickly, steering decisions from behind him, while relatives treated the company accounts like an inheritance already spent. Managers hid losses instead of reporting them. Standards collapsed floor by floor. Guests complained about stained linens, slow service, rooms that used to gleam under Amara's old systems, now visibly neglected. Salaries started arriving late, then later, then not at all. Senior staff resigned in waves, taking 20 years of institutional knowledge with them. Daniel tried to stop the bleeding. Banks turned him away one after another, each rejection a little colder than the last. Investors circled, but only to demand control, not to offer rescue. In private, without telling a single board member, Daniel sold his cars, the ones that had once defined him as much as his last name, and used the money to cover what he could of the junior staff's wages. He told no one. It changed nothing about the company's trajectory, but it was the first decision in years that was entirely his own. Competitors came to him quietly, offering money for confidential details about Amoni Hospitality Group's operations, Amara's company, though none of them knew that yet. Daniel refused every offer without hesitation. He'd known for over a year that Amara owned Amoni. He'd recognized her name buried in a filing months before anyone connected the dots. He kept that knowledge to himself, the way he'd once kept his feelings hidden from his own family. Except this silence cost him nothing and protected everything. Cole Heights reached the edge of collapse. The board, out of options and out of pride, agreed to sell. Only one offer came in. Serious. Fully funded. Non-negotiable. Amoni Hospitality Group. Daniel sat across from his father's empty chair the night before the meeting, and for the first time in 5 years, allowed himself to wonder if the mysterious buyer he was about to face might be the same woman he'd once let walk away in the rain. The boardroom door opened, and the story came full circle. Amara walked in wearing white, calm in a way that unsettled the room more than anger would have. Daniel rose halfway before he seemed to remember how to stand properly, words catching somewhere behind his throat. Victoria recovered first, and predictably, with an accusation. "This is revenge," she said, dressed up as business. "This is a signature," Amara replied, "that saves the jobs of 200 people you never bothered to learn the names of." She laid out the terms without raising her voice. Amoni would clear every unpaid salary immediately. Employees who had kept the company alive through the worst of it would be protected and reinstated. Managers who had hidden losses and stolen from the company would face formal investigation, no exceptions. Daniel would remain, not as chief executive, but as operations manager, a role suited to what he actually knew how to do. Victoria would lose her board position entirely. Victoria's composure cracked. "This company carries my family's name. It belongs to us." Amara didn't raise her voice. "Your family name didn't save this company," she said. "Your employees kept it alive while you protected your pride instead of their salaries." The board voted before Victoria could object further. Amara signed the acquisition papers in the same room where she'd once stood accused, and walked out into a lobby lined with staff, waiting to meet the new owner. Some recognized her instantly. The security officers who had once searched her locker wouldn't meet her eyes. The colleague who'd laughed the day she was dismissed now stood among the supervisors, visibly bracing for what was coming. Amara gave them nothing to brace for. No public reckoning, no names called out, no theatre of revenge. She addressed the staff simply. Their future here would depend on performance and integrity going forward, nothing else. Her restraint moved through the room like something heavier than anger would have. Victoria watched from the doorway, furious that the woman she'd once thrown money at to disappear had just taken everything without needing to raise her voice once. Before Amara left the building, she turned to her assistant. "Open an independent investigation," she said, "into a missing necklace from 5 years ago. I want to know exactly whose hands it passed through before it reached my bag." The investigation moved faster than anyone expected, because people who'd stayed silent for 5 years were finally willing to talk. A retired security guard, tracked down through old employment records, admitted that the former security manager had entered Amara's room alone before the search ever officially began. The necklace itself led investigators to a name none of them expected. One of Victoria's closest friends, who confirmed under questioning that Victoria had borrowed the jewelry weeks before reporting it stolen, never mentioning she'd worn it once and never returned it. The former security manager broke fastest of all. Faced with payment records tracing back to Victoria's personal account, he confessed in full. She'd paid him to plant the necklace in Amara's bag the morning after the engagement dinner. Amara called them all into the same room where her dismissal had happened 5 years earlier. Daniel, Victoria, the investigator with the file now finally complete. The evidence was laid out plainly, without theatre, because the truth no longer needed embellishing. Daniel turned to his mother, something breaking loose in his voice that had stayed buried for years. "You did this to her. To us." Victoria didn't deny it. "I protected this family from shame," she said, chin lifted the same way it had been in the boardroom the day Amara returned. "Everything I did was for this family's name." "Then you protected a name," Daniel said, "and destroyed everything that name was supposed to mean." He removed her remaining access to the company that afternoon. No negotiation, no delay, 5 years too late, but final all the same. He turned to Amara last, the weight in his face different now, stripped of every excuse he'd once hidden behind. "I loved you," he said, "but I was too weak to stand beside you when it mattered." "You didn't lose me because your mother hated me," Amara answered quietly. "You lost me because you watched her destroy me, and you let it happen." "Give me another chance," he said. "Please." Amara shook her head, gentle but certain. "I forgive you," she said. "But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It just means I'm no longer carrying the weight of it." Daniel didn't argue. He simply nodded, and the next morning, he returned to Cole Heights. Not as chief executive, not as an heir, but as an employee under the woman he'd once let disappear into the rain. Nobody at Cole Heights treated Daniel like an heir anymore. And for the first time in his life, that turned out to be exactly what he needed. He arrived before his shift started. He handled guest complaints himself, instead of delegating them downward. He sat through financial management courses he should have taken a decade earlier, absorbing criticism from managers half his age without once reaching for his surname as a shield. Amara watched from a distance, careful and unconvinced. Words had failed her before. This time, she needed to see a pattern, not a performance. The pattern came slowly. Daniel uncovered a fraud scheme running through several senior managers, one of them his own uncle, and reported every detail without hesitation, without trying to protect family loyalty over the truth. When a competitor attempted to sabotage Amani's newest hotel launch through a supply contract manipulation, Daniel caught it early and quietly shut it down before it could touch Amara's company at all. He never told her. Adrian did, months later, almost by accident, mentioning offhand that Daniel had sold his cars years earlier to cover unpaid staff wages, that he'd turned down competitors offering real money for confidential information about Amani, that he'd carried all of it in silence because he hadn't wanted credit or sympathy, only the chance to eventually deserve trust again. Amara said nothing when she heard it, but something in how she watched him afterward had shifted. Daniel never pushed. He never asked her to reconsider, never treated his changed behavior like currency owed a reward. "I'm no longer asking you to believe my words," he told her one evening, simple and unguarded. "I'll live with the chance to prove them instead." Amara studied him for a long moment. The same rooftop lighting, a different man standing under it. A week later, she sent him an invitation to the opening of her newest hotel. 1 year after Cole Heights changed hands, Amara opened a hotel bearing her mother's name. The ceremony less a business event than a marker of everything the journey had cost and built. Adrian stood among the honored guests, quietly proud of the woman he'd hired off a rain-soaked bench years earlier. Employees applauded as she spoke, and near the back of the room, without seeking attention or a seat near the front, Daniel watched her with a kind of pride that asked for nothing in return. Amara noticed him there. She remembered the man who had once stayed silent while his mother tore her apart at a dinner table. And she also saw the man who'd spent an entire year proving, quietly and without applause, that he'd become someone else. After the ceremony ended, she crossed the room toward him. "You once promised we'd build something together," she said. Daniel lowered his eyes. "I broke that promise." Amara reached out and took his hand. Not a surrender, not forgetting, simply a decision. "Then this time," she said, "we start with the truth." They agreed to rebuild slowly. No rushed wedding, no return to secrecy, no promises without action behind them. Amara kept full ownership of everything she'd built. Daniel stood beside her, without ever trying to compete with what she'd earned. That evening, Amara stood in the Cole Heights lobby during the busiest hour of the night. The same marble floor she'd once crossed carrying a single bag, while people laughed from the doorway. Every department in the building answered to her now. Every name on the payroll depended on decisions she made. But her greatest victory wasn't the company, the title, or the lobby full of people who once looked away from her. It was standing there, finally, fully certain of exactly what she was worth. If you believe forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, like this video and tell me in the comments. Did Amara make the right choice giving Daniel another chance? Or should she have walked away for good? Subscribe for the next story of a woman who rebuilt everything from nothing.